I'm good now. Thank you. My- Hey, everyone, I apologize. I thought I was live, but evidently not. Uh, so thank you, Rohan, Geeta, Vignesh, and Neenan for sending your comments in. Uh, Today, what we're going to do is talk about brainstorming techniques. Brainstorming has two parts. First part is brain, right? We'll use our collective intellectual energies to generate a storm of ideas, right? If you think of a storm is kind of like imagine a tornado, right, which runs around like in a spiral. It has a lot of energy. It picks up things as it goes, but it doesn't start off that way, right? The starting of a storm is kind of slow, and then over time it just picks up pace. Our idea generation is kind of like that, right? We rarely, tend, unless you're in a moment of inspiration where everything just comes out, you kind of have to work towards it. So in today's session, we'll be covering a couple of techniques that will allow us to generate a bunch of ideas. And then in the second half of the session, I'll just talk about a simple framework that you can use, to filter them out. So Rohan, if you're going to think of a fintech startup, right, which idea to work on, or if Geeta wants to pick up one idea on how to empower children, because you can have, let's say, 10 good ideas, but if you try to execute all of them at the same time, it's going to be a challenge. Okay. However, the good part is you've got to generate those 10, 20, 30 different ideas in the first place. Okay. So today we just start. I'll do my screen sharing in a minute. Just hold on. And can someone just type that you can see my screen? You should see this slide which says how to brainstorm. Okay, great. Thank you. So this is going to be like a working presentation, right? As we just type in different things. Keep the chat box active. I'm looking at it over here. So anything that I can fit in the flow, I will. But if not, I'll find time for Q&A. Now you'll see me kind of looking up. There's a second screen, which of course you can't see, but that's where I'm doing this presentation. Now, before you start your brainstorming, any ideation technique, there are some ground rules which you should keep in mind. Every game, no matter how fun it is, has to start with rules, right? If you look at a cricket game or like a T20, there are some ground rules that it's going to be 20 overs per side. There's going to be two strategic timeouts, stuff like that. So ground rules do apply in brainstorming also. And those simply are that first and foremost, you got to get into a good calm state. And for this, it doesn't mean you have to go to Goa, right? Going to Goa helps, not absolutely required. But just find a place where you're nice, calm, happy. So I'm going to turn off these helpful design ideas. So you got to figure out a place where, and it can be a physical place, but importantly, it's a mental place that you got to be calm. You got to be free of distractions. So put your phone on silent mode. Make sure notifications are absent. If you like to have some munching while you ideate, great. Grab some finger food, not complex food, but just finger food. Make sure you have some nice music on, stuff that you like, uh, and of course, any drinks like tea, coffee, all that. For music, so I'm a I'm of Gujarati origin, right? So I understand Gujarati well. I speak Hindi, I speak English. One thing I've realized is that if I have music with these three languages on, I'm lost in the music. So I'll leave whatever I'm doing and I'll get lost in the song. So instrumental music works really well for me, or I play music which is from a language which I like, but I don't understand. Right. So sometimes I'll play Tamil music, I'll play, Telugu or Malayalam music. I don't understand those words, and that's why I don't get distracted. So it's a bit weird, but just do something, kind of like that. Music is nothing distracting and only finger food. Now, there are things you have to take care of for yourself. So, first and foremost, you got to allow yourself to go wild. The world tries to make sure that we are tame, right? So, before, let's say at school, if you were answering something, you try to figure out, am I giving the right answer? Am I giving something where the teacher will not be upset at me? If I answer something, will people laugh at me? So over time, we picked up habits in which we've tried to filter our own thoughts. Here, that is not required. It's a no filter approach that we need. So mentally allow yourself to go wild. And that really means that you defer judgment. We love to give our inputs. We like to, talk of ourselves as good critical thinkers, not required for brainstorming, right? So leave all of that completely aside. Okay, this is really what's required. And in and in terms of, there's a question on pen and paper, or whether it's any specific tools, anything goes, right? Sometimes I like to write on pen and paper, but it can be a PowerPoint slide deck for me, like a blank slide, right? So I really like to brainstorm on a slide which looks like this. It's as vanilla as it can be, right? Because I don't want any external influences. When I'm doing this exercise, there are people I've heard who like to, let's say, record their ideas on their phone, right? So they'll turn on the voice recorder on the phone and they'll just rattle off things. It doesn't matter, right? Take whatever is works best for you. Now, there is something called as overthinking for tools, meaning there are people who are like, "Hey, I got to have the right slide template before I start working on it." So if you go in that mode, or you might be like, the paper I write on needs to have a specific thickness, the pen I write on has to be of a particular brand. All that are just excuses, and those are, again, you're adding conditions that build judgment. So let all of that aside. Okay, give yourself the freedom to be free. Okay, now having said that, let's dive into the first option. And I always, and over time when I picked this up, picked up innovation techniques, I kind of had to discover myself, like how my brain works, and I had to be at peace with it. And the best way to do it is by going solo. So if you are thinking about a problem, right? So start with a question, a problem you want to solve. That's it. Uh, so it can be something like, how do I empower children, right? And that can be a broad question, but maybe you may want to pick a narrower space. Could be, how do I teach, you know, let's say, how do I teach English to children who don't speak it, right? Or how do I empower meditation techniques to kids in the age group of 8 to 10, right? You can make it narrow like that. You can start wide. uh, it doesn't matter, right? So in solo technique, and this takes a few iterations for you to completely get used to this idea. The format I recommend is as follows. You take the first 2 minutes to really identify what you will be solving. Okay? And this is the important part, because you might be saying that I'm going to address world peace, but world peace can be an outcome. I'm really going to address how I let's say impart education techniques, or as Ninan is saying, he's looking for a sports podcast. So okay, and that in itself is a good niche. So he has to think about what can I address in my podcast, right? So let's say the topic would be the different topics that his podcast can cover. Okay, so take the first 2 minutes to really identify what you will be solving. Put a timer. Okay, use your cell phone as a timer. The next part is important. Set a timer for 8 minutes and just start writing whatever comes to your head. Right? If you're someone who works with audio, who thinks out loud, turn on your voice recorder and just start rattling off ideas. Okay, so keep writing ideas on paper or a notepad. I really like the feel that when I type something or when I write something in my brain, that those ideas, even if I don't act upon them, they kind of are set, right? So at this point of time, in these 8 minutes, you are generating volume. Okay? Meaning there's no filtering, there's nothing that, well, how can I get such an idea, or that's a stupid idea, or that's a brilliant idea. You're not scoring anything. You're just letting whatever hits your head, you're just putting that on paper. Okay, that's how you build this approach of no filter. There is a time and place for filtering, not right now. Okay, we'll come back, to that stage afterwards. Okay, so start with this thing for about 8 minutes. So at this stage, if you keep writing for 8 minutes, I think that's enough time for your brain to give you one round. It's you've warmed up. So Nani asked why that specific number. I like that time period because at around the 5 to 8 minute mark, sometimes you may hit a plateau that everything that you could think of has been dumped on the paper. And at that point of time, instead of extending it further, you might be encouraged to switch your ideation off. So stop at the 8 minute mark, even if you have something which is waiting to jump out. Just stop at the 8 minute mark. And after that, what you do is you take a break for 2 minutes. Just walk away from whatever you're doing. Okay, look outside the window. Take a few extra sips of your tea, coffee, grab water, go to the restroom, but basically step away from your work. Okay, now that you are there, you come back and I'll give you this analogy of this sugarcane juice, right? If you've seen this sugarcane juice, uh, that guy takes that stalk and he puts it through that roller, and that first batch of juice has come out. That's what your first 8 minutes did. Now every stalk is different, right? And we want to make sure that we get everything empty. So now we go for another 8 minutes. Okay, and you just start dumping everything out. Even when you think that you can't generate anything more, don't give up. Don't open your phone and see what message someone has sent you on WhatsApp. Let those 8 minutes go past, even if you are staring at the screen. It's completely okay. The whole idea behind this thing is for you to understand how your brain works. Okay, so at this stage, and after this, you just pause for a day or two. Okay, again, we're not starting the filtering and everything right now. So this is how the solo technique works. And if you do this a couple of times, I think you will generate plenty of ideas. I don't want to have this as a very long session, like a 1 hour session or 2 hour session. in a solo thing to generate those ideas, I think that in my experience that doesn't work. This short burst is far more effective. And just as we work in exercising, we work towards building a muscle. You don't start by just a 2 hour or a 3 hour exercise day. If you do that within the first 3 or 4 days, you'll quit. Here it's just kind of a similar approach where you go solo for about 20 minutes or so, and these 20 minutes you can carve out any time of the day, right? Even if you have a very packed schedule, you can carve out 20 minutes, say during your lunch break. You can do it during the evenings. Just the time matters a lot. So the mental state for that is important, right? So if you're doing it at the end of a very busy day, go easy on yourself. See, if you're not able to generate things, sure, that was the only time you could find, no problem. Go for it the next day. Okay. So this is how I recommend you to start off, and be very happy with this thing. Be happy with yourself, because the more you do it, the more you understand how your brain works. Okay, and now I will segue into the group thing and all that, but not immediately. Okay, the other way I want you to let's say you've done this whole solo brainstorming, for a couple of times, and you think you've got every idea done. Right now, I think if you go back to kids or rural areas and how they pluck fruits from the trees and all that, the first approach is you're throwing things at the fruit and trying to get it to fall, or you try to find the tallest person who's going to pluck that thing for you. So in this approach, what we did is you kind of got all the low-hanging fruits. Afterwards, you still want to get fruit, right? And you can spot some really ripe mangoes at the top of a tree. What you do is you get someone who's really powerful and get that person to shake the tree, right? And that lets all the other fruit come down. So the other approach I sometimes like to do solo is reverse brainstorming. It works similar to what we did discuss in the solo approach, but here the question is, what is the worst, the most terrible, the most nonsensical way to solve this problem? Which is the way in which you would never think of even solving this problem. So you're trying to do this kind of ulta, just it doesn't make sense at all to do it, yet you want to have this idea on paper, right? So again, this is a great way to eliminate your filters. And believe me, we all have terrible ideas. We just don't like to admit it, but all of us have generated enough of terrible ideas. So doing this is easier than it looks, right? So for example, if I were to teach this course, right, and maybe some of you signed up because you thought that, hey, here's someone who maybe knows a bit more about innovation than us. So if someone were to do, let's say, a podcast, they're like, hey, I've got to be an expert in this topic before I can talk about it, right? Or if someone is saying that, so essentially what we are trying to do is we are saying that, hey, we'll work towards a level of expertise before we start teaching. So examples can be, what if a beginner taught an advanced level course? So imagine like an Olympics competition, right? You have Michael Phelps who's trying to go for 10 Olympic gold medals, right? So he wants that advice. So he's going to obviously find the best coach. What if instead of finding the best coach, you gave him someone who does not even know swimming? That just absolutely will not work, right? Or So you're trying to generate as many contrarian ideas as possible. So if someone is doing a podcast, I'd be like, what is the way to make it least engaging, right? What if instead of pausing and all that, he just keeps droning about a topic? That's the most terrible way to do it. If if someone is talking about teaching children, like, hey, I'm not going to teach at all, I'm going to let them play. That is empowerment for me, right? So you're trying to generate these weird, awkward ideas, and there is a reason for this. Okay, and the reason is that sometimes these odd, weird techniques end up working the best. Imagine the influencers we have today, like on YouTube, who are teaching people how to invest. They are not your financial experts. They are not the people with those fancy degrees. They are not, let's say, necessarily business people. But they are people who are like, hey, we started off with zero. We had the same questions as you have right now. Here is how we did it. So this idea of learning from this weird ulta technique actually, ended up being amazing, both for the influencer and more so for the learner, because now I'm learning swimming along with someone who's equally likely to drown as me, and that somehow makes me feel more comfortable. Okay, and what this does is it shakes all the ideas. You've got all the fruit out. Okay, and so these two techniques are your solo techniques. Do this a few times before you start doing it with a team. Most importantly, it's for you to understand yourself, right? And that you are at peace with it, because there are things that people follow in group brainstorming, where just because of judgment, uh, we fail things. So with that, let me start with one group brainstorming approach. In group brainstorming also, the ground rules are very similar. You got to get people in a nice room. If it's, let's say, in an office building, or if it's at a co-working space or a coffee shop or something, I prefer doing it where there are plenty of windows, so that people can space out. Even if boredom helps, right? So if someone is droning about something and like, yaar, ye paka raha hai, let me think about something else. That's when the brilliant idea hits you, right? So do that. Get plenty of windows. If you can do it outdoors, that works. If, Usually for group brainstorming, I like to have coffee and something sweet. Yeah, this is where my gujju part comes in. And I'm like, all the sweet things, they get your nice happy juices flowing. There's a good energy which happens. So if you have like cookies, or it can be at the most pakoras and all that, but nothing too messy, because imagine here, someone will have pakoras, chutney will fall on themselves. Instead of brainstorming, they'll be talking about completely different things. But if you have biscuits and all that, that works. Okay, the other important thing is, there will be people who are known to pass judgment, right? So let's say I would not like to brainstorm with my teachers, because teachers are likely to say, hey, that's a good approach, I'll give you 10 marks out of 10. That's an okay approach, I'll give you 7 marks. So if there are people who are known to be filters, you know you have a separate meeting with them, right? You try not, what you want is a group of peers, people who are very happy talking about it. Okay, so again, importantly, I'll just write down here so we are all on the same page. No judgment during group brainstorming. The approach which I like over for a group ones that have worked in the past for me, is that you pick one person to set the stage. So what this person does is, they go to the group telling that here is why we are doing this. Okay, and that why is very important. So if you have a team, so let's say there's a team which is going to work on this kids empowerment, right? And they have to tell that what is the nature of things that they would like to do. And and again, children is a broad category, so you can say, hey, I'm going to address certain things for kids in a specific age group, or they could be from a specific, let's say, social background, economic background, or it could be kids, let's say, in the area of a particular domain. It could be that, hey, I want to empower kids with science and technical education, right? So, and but that's not it. You have to give them more context, that why do you think the problem exists today, and why you think that problem is important to be solved. You're not giving your solutions to them, you're just setting the stage. You're getting everyone to the same page, to the level that they understand, yes, I agree with this problem. Okay, and after that, we follow something similar like we did in the first round of our solo exercise, which is you give a timer of 8 to 10 minutes. Let everyone type their ideas in silence. So we are not discussing things as a group, not yet. Okay, so right now, let's say if I gave everyone a piece of paper and I asked them, just write down as many ideas you can within 8 minutes. Okay, and after that, you kind of try to do what your exam proctors did. Last minute remaining, pens off, you do all that. Okay, then we pause, and I recommend, let's make it consistent. I wrote 8 to 10. So then we pause, repeat for another 8 minutes. Now this is a bit longer, but what we are trying to do is get as many of our individual ideas on the table as possible. Okay, then what I'd like to do, I- let me also mark this as optional, because sometimes, especially at work meetings, you may have a thing where if you got to wrap this up in 1 hour, or so if you have a time constraint, mark this as the second round as optional. Okay, then you give people about 3 minutes to pick their top two ideas. Okay, 3 minutes tends to be a bit overkill. Most of the times, uh, everyone tends to pick their ideas within 1 minute or around the 90-second mark. But if you give them 3 minutes, they sometimes think that, okay, I have time to pick. I'm not under a time pressure. I can think about which idea appeals to me the most. Okay, and if you think everyone's done at the 2 minute mark, no problem. You save that minute. Then what you do is you split people in groups of, let's say, around 5 people is ideal, but if you have a large group, max 8. Five, in my opinion, gets discussions going. Eight is also okay, but if you start going beyond that, you start getting these effects of whispering, and someone, a discussion is going, and someone at the other side of this large room cannot hear what that discussion is, and they lose the interest. So you want people who can sit around, like, even if you don't have a table, they can sit around in a circle by themselves, and just start talking. So each person starts with their best idea. And here is where everyone chimes in. Okay. And there's one rule I would like to insert over here. When you chime in, when you add to an idea, it starts with yes. And So if I give you an idea, which is, so Neenan, if I give you an idea, maybe even if you don't like it, if I give an idea, which is like, Neenan, your sports podcast should focus on Gilli Danda. It's a game that everyone played as a kid. No one that this I don't think there'll be any Premier League for this Gilli Danda that we used to play as kids. Now, even though you may not like my suggestion, what you should say is yes, and I think we should get participation from more kids. So with the and, you're actually adding further to the idea. That might be my best idea. It resonates in me. But for this group thing, it's important that we keep going towards this upward spiral. I'm sure you've experienced something where, let's say, you're trying to pick a movie to watch with your friends, right? And you might have said a movie that someone said very strongly that, hey, we are not interested in that. And what that leads to is a shutdown. It's very hard to come up with the next suggestion because that filter has is playing its effect. So this yes and is one way to become wild. Where you're accepting someone's bad ideas and you're adding to it. So yes and is one way through which you can go wild. So you keep repeating this thing. Of course, you try to have a time limit of this, to maybe about 20 minutes. Because over time, what you will see is people's discussions plateau and everyone's ideas may start converging. And so after that, what you do is take the last 5 minutes and ask the group to pick their best two approaches. Okay, so imagine if your group was 5 people, those 5 people gave 2 ideas each, which was total of 10 ideas. Those 10 were discussed with the team with this whole yes and approach, and you got them to a state. Okay. So out of those 10 ideas, which were discussed in greater detail, over time you're just picking up two which your group thinks are the best approaches to suggest. And if you have multiple teams which have done that, again, those are teams which have received those collective energies and they are suggesting 2 ideas each. Okay, so this is a group brainstorming approach that you can try. I'm going to pause here and take a look at any questions and answers. So Vignesh asked, can we all do solo brainstorming first and then meet up too? Yes, you can. Uh, Try to ensure everyone has the same set of instructions. So what Vignesh is essentially saying is that, hey, there's a time constraint. So what you said is these highlighted steps. Okay, you're doing it on your own, and instead you're diving in, on this, and that does work, provided everyone is on the same page. Okay, and which is why this part, the setting the stage, becomes that much more important. And because of that, I'll mark it as red. When we do solo brainstorming, everyone has different assumptions in their mind. There's no opportunity to clarify those if you're all going solo, right? So we all come up with our own suggestions, and instead of making this path-breaking dish, we ended up making a khichdi. And khichdi is okay, but you won't pay a premium price for it. Okay, Rohan asked a question. Unlike solo in the group, you are not only generating but you're also converging. Yes, you are. Uh, you are, and that's a brilliant observation, Rohan. So in a group, you want to converge. In solo, uh, the purpose also is to let yourself loose. And I'll come to how you converge both in a solo and a group later on. Okay, now in a solo also, what's going to happen is after a few iterations of those, you will know what your 3 or 4 best ideas are, and you'll have a bias towards those, uh, but I don't want you to act on them right away. Okay, similar thing with the group. Okay, Geeta, I think you were asking me about how we can truly go viral. I think try this yes and approach. I think uh, just those two words have played a very good effect on myself. So try that and let me know. Okay, any questions? We'll pause for 10 seconds and then move on to the next one. Okay, so now we go towards a simple framework to pick which idea to act upon. How do you select an idea to act upon? To pick an idea, okay, what you have generated on paper are just thoughts, right? And you want to take them to fruition, meaning they have to have a desired effect. So let's say if it's a podcast, or if it's empowering kids, or launching a new startup, there are different goals for that. Okay, so the simple framework which I like to do is I like to give it the three design challenge. And this is a deep topic, but very simply, the three challenges are people, technical, and business. Okay, in people, what we're trying to do is determine that there is a market for our solution. Okay, so if if you're doing a sports podcast, you want to know, hey, is there a market for people who are sports enthusiasts? And while the answer is obviously yes, assuming if Neenan was as crazy as me and he said, I love the idea of this Gilly Danda podcast, we've got to make sure that there are people who are interested in listening about it, who are interested in knowing the tips and techniques and strategies that apply to Gilly Danda, which I never got, by the way. I was a terrible player at it. But it's something for us to validate, right? So is there a market for this solution? And who are the people who like this product? Who are the people? What are the current dislikes? You're trying to understand as much as you can about your customers as such, even if they're not paying for you, even if they're not paying for this thing. You want to make sure that, hey, are people interested in this thing? Okay, the next prong that you address is technical, and by technical I don't mean just engineering or scientific. It's rather, is there a differentiation? Okay, so here, what we try to understand is, you're offering a new solution. How does it differentiate over anything else? So this Gilly Danda podcast, I have no idea if anything like that exists, right? I've not come across it on YouTube. I've not seen ESPN or other sports sites cover it. So if we introduce it, of course it will be new, right? But then you also want to address, how do you plan to differentiate, right? So here I'll switch the example, and which is a school which teaches without books, right? So that can be a big differentiation in itself. Uh, but maybe it plans to teach by experiments, right? It has kids who learn science by doing things. They're not even shown the theory. They're not even uh, you know given an idea about equations. They figure it out on their own, right? So is there a differentiation? And if possible, how much better is it than the competition? Because you might be releasing a product in a market where there are other products. So if you can quantify, get to that. So if you are, let's say, doing a fintech startup where maybe a metric is going to be the cost of transaction or a speed of transaction, measure that. If you can't measure it accurately, try to estimate it to the best of your ability. And the last prong over here is business, which is it financially viable, financially worth it? If you launch this as a business, will people pay for it? So that fintech product, let's say it's going to earn its revenue by charging people a percentage of every transaction value. So the number of transactions it has to support, there's a technical backend which is responsible for it, and then you have the number of customers, who would be doing all these transactions. So if you take all of that into account, is it going to be a financially worth it business? And you can dive deeper into it by applying various models, right? There are various financial estimation tools that you can use, or you can just follow, let's say, a Marwadi approach. Like I come from a Gujarati Marwadi business family approach, where they try to understand things by this concept called mota mota. Mota mota, here's how much we make. So it can be a quick calculation like that, or it can be a more complex involved. But before you start executing on any idea, you've got to consciously understand that, am I servicing a customer set that is interested in my product? Am I giving them something that they have not seen before and which is going to be better? And does it make financial sense for me to do it? So once you pass your ideas through these challenges, they will work as filters. And it's better to always do this at the end of your ideation, at the end of your brainstorming phase. So you have a separate idea selection phase. So remember, we left out those teachers or those people who are good at applying filters. This is the stage where you bring them in, right? So because this is as objective as you can be. You're not saying that, oh, here's an idea we are passionate about. You've taken all of that and you're putting those through objective lenses. Okay, so that's really what I had, and now let's see if I can answer any questions in the next 5 minutes or so. So Rohan asked, can the differentiation be just a different geography? Possibly, and there are times when those things have worked, right? So it can be, let's say, a quick service restaurant brand which say exists in the US or UK, and you may bring it to India, that India has not seen that. So it could be that, and that's okay. Just be cognizant about it, that hey, this is the differentiation that we are bringing. Vice versa, things have also worked where in the US, let's say, there were no Indian restaurants. So you're taking something which is a known approach and you're bringing it there. But those other two challenges, that if you're bringing that thing which worked in a different country, will the people in India like that? And if you bring it over here, let's say there's a price premium associated with it. So despite that, is it going to be financially worth it? If not, then again, you try churning it, right? Then you may have to go back to your brainstorming thing and you're like, how do I reduce the cost of this thing to make it work in country A versus country B? So that's your brainstorming question. You generate a bunch of ideas and then you keep filtering. So thank you, Geeta. Do try it with your team. Let me know how it works. Meena asked, can you share some small tips on how to identify the people section, how to do objective research, or if there's a market? Yeah, to me, that's probably the most important aspect of every innovation exercise. The way you identify the people is, I'm guessing most of us already know who the target market is, but sometimes we assume that the target market is just around us. Okay, so try to first start with a broader thing, that demographics. Is my market teenagers? Is my market school students, right? Or are they working professionals? You start broad like that, but afterwards you still try to make sure that you have a large sample size. Like you try to look at, okay, if it is working professionals, what am I talking about? Are they tech workers? Are they blue collar workers? Where do they live? Okay, so you try to get as much variety as possible. So let's say if you're going after the blue collar workers, don't just pick blue collar workers from metro cities, right? Try to pick them up from tier 2 towns or tier 3 towns and so on. The most, I guess, critical aspect of this is you try to understand what their pain points are. So this means you engage in conversations with them. You try to determine where they're expressing frustration and where they're expressing joy. If they're suggesting a product through word of mouth, right, where uh, a favorite exercise of mine is if I go to a new place, it can be a town, and I'll ask them, I want to have a quick snack. What is the best snack place you can tell me? And they'll point me to the place. They're not getting paid for that. That is word of mouth. They're sharing their joy with me, right? Or if I ask them about something, if I see them observing a product where they're expressing frustration, I want to make note of that. So you try to get as much information as you can about your target segment, and make sure your mapping is uh, has a good sample size. And so I guess that's how you really do it. And um, Vignesh, and I'm doing this for fun. I enjoy teaching people how to practice uh, various innovation approaches that have worked for me. So I'm happy to chat with you offline if that helps you. I'm going to stop sharing for now. Really appreciate your kind comments. Hope you found this useful. I have to say I'm still used to these, still not used to these emojis, and it's kind of nice to see them. Yeah. Most importantly, I thank you for staying here with for this session today. You could have spent your time watching something fun, something you could have just enjoyed your beautiful Saturday, and you chose to spend it over here with me. So I truly thank you for that. I hope I added some value to your life. So great, very happy to see the comments come in. I really enjoyed spending my time here with you today. Uh, so yeah, in the chat box or even later on, feel free to write what is it that you'd like to learn more about. I plan on doing, let's say, a series of these. So hopefully we'll see you there whenever possible. Okay, that's it from me for today. Have a very pleasant Saturday and enjoy your weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy. Bye.